Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Si ven pronto, Maranatha.
Okay, God is love. Love is the primary force behind the universe. Love is the force behind all of creation. Love is the foundation of the relationship between God and creation. Love is certainly the foundation of the relationship between God and his creatures, and especially God and man. Love is a more fundamental fabric of existence than the physical universe is. It's a more fundamental fabric. It is, of existence. Okay. Now, question. What is the opposite of love? Now, it's easy to say hate is the opposite of love, but I'll argue that fear is the opposite of love rather than hate. Okay, fear is the devil's diabolical counterfeit of love, perversion of love. God's fundamental relationship with his creation is one of love. His fundamental relationship with man is love. The devil's fundamental relationship to all of his minions, to everyone he controls, is fear. And fear is a much more powerful driving force than hatred is. And I'll give an example. Hatred can make you kill somebody you hate. Pretty powerful. Fear can make you kill somebody you love. It's true. There are people who are so blackmailed, so intimidated, so terrified of what's going to happen to them if they don't obey orders, that they will kill somebody they love. Being willing to, having a drive or an emotion that enables you or motivates you to kill somebody you love, that's a stronger driving force than being motivated to kill somebody you hate. Now, I'm going to get a little bit de-live-ish right now. Some of you may know that about MK Ultra. I don't know if any of you know about the MK Ultra program. It's real. It exists. It actually was testified to in Senate hearings back about 30 years ago. The MK Ultra program, which was never ended, unfortunately, by the way, was a CIA program to turn people into robots, to turn people into, to program people so that when the triggering word was said, they would lose all consciousness of their own personality, and they would take on a totally different personality, and they would do what they were programmed to do. It's really true. If you want to see it in a very good movie, see Mel Gibson's Conspiracy Theory, because that's what it's about. But there's plenty of testimony about this. There's testimony from the psychologists who programmed these people. There's testimony in front of the Senate hearing, and there's testimony from programmed people, MK Ultras, who managed to get deprogrammed. It's all for real. And what the CIA did was they basically tortured and terrified these people so much, sometimes when they were children, so that they dissociated, and that they basically repressed all of the memory of what was done to them, but it was still there underneath the surface. And they were conditioned in such a way that if the magic phrase was said by somebody, that barrier would go away, and the repressed personality would come to the surface and totally dominate over the kind of waking personality, and could be told to do anything. And there are a lot of people, me included, that see a lot of the, for instance, bizarre mass killings where somebody for no reason shoots up a Walmart or shoots up a school. Those are MK Ultras. And usually, look at what happens. What happens is when there's a fight in the government trying to put in more gun control, all of a sudden there's a mass school shooting by somebody who just has no motive, just flips out and decides to shoot up Parkland High School or shoot up Uvalde High School or whatever. And I think almost all those cases are MK Ultra, and there's evidence of them being MK Ultra in the backgrounds of the people sometimes. The guy who shot Ronald Reagan, what was his name? Oh my goodness, this is my age showing. When Ronald Reagan was almost killed, the young man who shot him was actually a member of another wealthy Texas oil family, Hinckley, Gary Hinckley, and see, the thing is that sometimes, not always, the people that they program to do this are people from within cabal families. So it can be a little bit of a red flag. John Hinckley, okay, John Hinckley Jr. Hey, little pro tip, little tidbit. You know that later in the week, when that Reagan was shot by John Hinckley Jr., Neil Bush had a dinner date with, I think, John Hinckley's father, either father or uncle, was already arranged. In other words, Neil Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush, had a pre-existing dinner date with John Hinckley's father or uncle for a couple of days after the shooting. All looks pretty suspicious, doesn't it? He didn't shoot him to impress Jodie Foster. I'm sorry. That was a very transparent cover story. The shooting was and now I got my details mixed up, so I'm not going to say anything. However, George Bush, was it H.W. Bush? I think it was H.W. Bush, would have been made president if Reagan had died. That gives George H.W. Bush a very strong, was it George H.W.? Or was it George W.? Anyway, it gives the Bush a very strong motivation for Hinckley to have shot Reagan. But anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is fear. And fear is so strong that it's the motivating force behind the MK Ultra program. And fear is strong enough to absolutely swamp I think pretty much any other motivation. So it is, I think, it's the most powerful tool in the devil's toolkit, and it's different from temptations. And I'm not sure if I can prove this, but I will argue that hatred, anger, lust, they can make you do crazy things. And they can definitely overwhelm you at the moment, but they will not override all other considerations and in as roughshod a way as fear will. And also, in a way, they require consent in another way that fear doesn't require consent, if that makes sense. When you feel the impulse of anger, it in a way, I mean, at least in me, maybe it's me, maybe it's not. It's easier to say no to that anger. It's easier to say no to that lust. It's easier to say no to that hatred than it is to say no to fear. Fear seems to me to be more primal. Now, having tried to set the stage of saying that fear is the devil's version of love, so to speak, it's his diabolical aping of love. And it's the fabric that weaves the devil's domain together, the way love is what weaves God's domain together. I'm sure fear is what weaves the relationship between Satan and the demons together. And that you know actually from exorcists. I have on my blogs the recording of the exorcism of Annalisa Michel. And you even hear it in from Father Ripperger's accounts. The demons themselves are tremendously controlled by fear, and that is, of course, because they're controlled. Their strings are being pulled by Satan, and Satan's strings are fear, just like God's strings are love, so to speak. Of course, love is anyway. Never mind. But there's an issue of consent with love, which there isn't with fear. So now. Another aspect of fear that's extremely interesting is that fear is intrinsically sacrilegious. It's intrinsically sacrilegious. If God is who he says he is, then there is never any reason to fear anything but God. In other words, if God is who he says he is, he totally loves us, and he's in total control of everything that happens to us. And nothing happens to us that isn't his will. A sparrow doesn't fall from the sky without your Father in heaven knowing it. Your very hairs are numbered. Are you not of more value than many sparrows? Why do you worry about the morrow? And so forth, in the Sermon on the Mount. If what God says is true, then it does not make, then fear of anything that the devil is sending us to be afraid of is actually sacrilege, because it's not taking God at his word. Now, finally, I may have exhausted my ability to put into words all of this kind of messy tapestry that I kind of had a glimpse of. But finally, martyrdom. What's the story with the martyrs? Did you ever wonder, why does the Catholic Church make such a big deal out of martyrs, right? What is the most overwhelming characteristic of martyrs? The most overwhelming characteristic of martyrs is that they were completely masters of fear. I don't want to say they didn't give in to fear. Here you have Diocletian, Roman emperor, or you have a American Indian telling you, let's take the Roman emperor, telling you that he is going to torture you in the most incredibly excruciating way possible, unless you throw a pinch of incense on the brazier to their pagan gods. You're going to be tortured to death in the most painful way that he can imagine. And yet the martyrs, they're not moved by fear. They don't give in to fear. They don't listen to fear. They master the fear completely. That's the one thing all the martyrs have in common. And if you ask me, that's why martyrs are held up to us in the unique way they are, is because fear is basically fear is the only thing that the devil has to manipulate us besides temptation. You can say fear is a temptation. I don't want to go there now because it gets beyond me. But I'm arguing that fear is not like the other temptations. Sure, the devil can, parade a naked woman into your seminary room if you're St. Thomas Aquinas or something, Um, he can tempt you, leaving you free to resist the temptation. But when he makes you scared of something, you're already scared in a deeper and more embedded way than you are by those temptations. If you can actually be immune from the influence of fear coming from Satan, all fear comes from Satan. All fear comes from Satan. Fear of the Lord is something else. Fear of the Lord is not the emotion, so to speak, of fear. Fear of the Lord is the determination, so to speak, not to displease the Lord. And if you want to be scared of anything, be scared of the Lord, be scared of being sent to hell. But all of the fear that I feel in my life is not coming from God. It's all coming from Satan. And it absolutely cripples me in many things that I want to do for God. If you can be immune from fear, then nothing is stopping you from, I don't want to say being, Mother Teresa of Calcutta or being St. Maximilian Kolbe. That's a little bit of a stretch. But the truth is, how many of the things we do that are not what God wants us to do come out of fear. Being concerned about our income. There easily is an element of fear there, right? Because we're trying to train to think that having a financial cushion protects us. Not giving away money, not giving all you have to the poor. There's an element of fear in that. Not becoming a priest or a religious. There's an element of fear in that. I'm not saying we all should be priests or religious, but the fact is, when anybody, makes a move towards God, they are faced with a lot of fear. I have witness testimonies in Honey from the Rock. Herman Cohen was consumed with fear just before he was baptized. David Moss, who was a Jewish convert, was consumed with fear the night before his baptism, and so forth. Alphonse Ratisbonne also. Just night sweats, waking up in the middle of the night terrified. I experienced that. I'm not going to say in what context, but it was before I did something which was a part of my vocation. And think about what makes you act the way you act sometimes, and what makes you not do something that you should do, that God wants you to do sometimes. And see if you can identify fear in it. Anyway, fear, look, I think that if you're one of us that are basically trying to please God, my guess is that our biggest impediments are fear and discouragement. They're not lust, they're not hatred, they're not anger, they're fear and discouragement. I think that that anxiety, discouragement, fear is not uncommon among daily communicants. Basically, people who are particularly want to be particularly dedicated to God. Being aware of heaven is probably a little bit of a, I don't want to say antidote to fear, but I'm thinking of martyrs. I mean, if the martyrs can actually have their eyes fixed on their reward, that would be pretty strong motivation. So anyway, I'm going to leave you now. Remember who we work for. Remember who we work for. We work for somebody who can make the sun stop spinning and crash to the earth. We work for someone who can make the sun stop moving in the sky and turn a day into 48 hours or whatever he did for Joshua. We work for someone who can give us an eternity of semi-divinity and bliss, and So don't be suckers.
Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Ven Señor Jesús, Maranatha. Si ven pronto, Maranatha.